Of all the wise things in the work of J.R.R. Tolkien, one of my favorites is how he deals with the prejudice of certain characters and races. In one of perhaps my favorite moments of the entire series, and one that I made a whole video on and couldn't really talk for that long without seriously choking up, was that Galadriel has this beautiful moment with Gimli where this happens. They come out of Moria and are devastated because of everything that happened there. But they go to Lothlorien where the elves made Gimli put on a blindfold, and then the whole fellowship ends up putting him on to show kind of solidarity and support for Gimli so the situation doesn't get even more tense. And when they stand in front of Galadriel, she shows incredible humility and speaks the dwarven name for things, and it floors Gimli. This is what the books say in this moment, and I could read this 1,000 times without getting bored of this section. This is incredible, one of my favorite sections in the entire first book. Dark is the water of Kelad-Zeram, and cold are the springs of Kibble-Nla, and fair were the many-pillared halls of Khazad-dûm in elder days before the fall of mighty kings beneath the stone. She looked upon Gimli, who sat glowering and sad, and she smiled. And the dwarf, hearing the names given in his own ancient tongue, looked up and met her eyes. And it seemed to him that he looked suddenly into the heart of an enemy and saw there love and understanding. Wonder came into his face, and then he smiled in answer. He rose clumsily and bowed in dwarf fashion, saying, "Yet more fair is the living land of Lorien, and the Lady Galadriel is above all the jewels that lie beneath the earth." It's such a beautiful moment in the book that dispels the prejudice and pride of these characters. And I believe when I wrote about this a few weeks ago, how I think Galadriel showed incredible humility here with her words. And it was that humility that changed Gimli's mind. And then Legolas and Gimli became fast friends, and after that it was a beautiful thing just to be able to read whatever was going on between them. But in the current chapter I am in Lord of the Rings, and shameless plug to subscribe because I'm reading Lord of the Rings for the first time, and publishing thoughts as I go throughout this entire book. So if you kind of would be into that sort of thing, make sure you subscribe. But I'm in the Road to Isengard chapter, where two things happen that seem to remove and correct the prejudice that a character or a group of characters had. And I found these really beautiful and insightful. The first is the men of Dunland.
We will die for Saruman.
Now, these men were pictured in a movie, where Saruman is kind of just feeding them propaganda.
They drove your people into the hills to scratch a living off rocks.
These men seem malleable, and already angry at the kingdom of Rohan. It seems like these men may have felt pushed out of the country because of the things Rohan has been doing, and maybe there's a bit of like, we were here first kind of mentality. I would actually honestly love to read about the history of these people to see what actually happened to them. So I kind of hope that's somewhere that Tolkien wrote about. I'm guessing it is because, he wrote the history of like this entire realm. But the books have these particular people at a different stage of the book. The men didn't go to burn and pillage Rohan. They actually fought in Helm's Deep against Rohan and with the Uruks from Isengard. There's a few moments that they have in the books, and one in particular, in that chapter, that Aragorn looked over the wall to parley with the orcs, and when these men saw Aragorn, they looked at him with wonder and fear in their eyes. But they kept on fighting. And this is what the book says about their prejudice being dismissed. It's after the Battle of Helm's Deep, when they're kind of cleaning up the bodies. No orcs remained alive. Their bodies were uncounted. But a great many of the hillmen had given themselves up, and they were afraid and cried for mercy. The men of the Mark took their weapons from them and set them to work. "Help now to repair the evil in which you have joined," said Erkenbrand. "And afterward you shall take an oath never again to pass the fords of Isen in arms, nor to march with the enemies of men. And then you shall go free back to your land, for you have been deluded by Saruman. Many of you have got death as a reward of your trust in him. But had you conquered, little better would your wages have been." The men of Dunland were amazed, for Saruman had told them that the men of Rohan were cruel and burned their captives alive. In the midst of the field before the Hornburg, two mounds were raised, and beneath them were laid all the riders of the Mark who fell in the defense. So those of the Eastdales upon one side, and those of the Westfold upon the other. But the men of Dunland were set apart in a mound below the dike. In a grave alone under the shadow of the Hornburg lay Hama, captain of the Kingsguard. He fell before the gate. Rest in peace, Hama, one of my favorite side characters. That was tragic to me. But this is the beauty of mercy in play. I love this moment so much in this book. And this was important for Tolkien to perhaps even help Tolkien kind of decipher between what makes someone good or what makes someone evil. The orcs would have never offered mercy to the kingdom of Rohan. But Rohan, even though they could kill all the men of Dunland for fighting against them with the orcs, Rohan shows them mercy in this moment. That is beautiful. And it's something that we all need. I also think this is fascinating how Saruman was leading them astray. He was deluding their mind with lies about Rohan so that it riled up the people of Dunland and caused them to fight against Rohan. I would have loved to see if these men treated with a healthy Theoden, how that actually would have gone and what Theoden would have done for these men. But them standing there being amazed at the mercy of Rohan is something that Saruman should have foreseen. It's like his lies are coming back to bite him in the butt. He's there saying that they will show no mercy and that they will burn them all alive in order that they might fight against Rohan. And then when Rohan wins and shows mercy to these men, I think it's like a sure thing that these men are now going to respect Rohan. And eventually, if not immediately, will fight against Saruman because of it. Well, probably not immediately because I think they kind of need a breather and some downtime with their own thoughts. But I do think it's just an incredible show of mercy here and just something that the text keeps like hinting and not even hinting, yelling at me for. I think mercy is a really underutilized thing in some books, and I think this is a really, really great depiction of it. I think it's even more of an honor that the men of Rohan honored the death of Dunland with a burial mound. It was apart from the other two mounds, but still, it seemed to show them honor rather than the orc bodies, which they kind of just threw and let the trees deal with them. It's just the ability to show someone who's dead, show them honor, that I think that's kind of what dispelled the men of Dunland as well. It's another way to see who really is on the side of good here. But the other moment of dispelling prejudice comes from Legolas and Gimli, and I'm going to write a whole different essay about them as well. But this is going to be a while of removing the prejudice between both of them because there's been centuries of hatred between elves and dwarves. So when these two talk, it's kind of really fun to see their misperceptions of the other's race and how gently and perfectly the other corrects them. This is another moment for why I love Gimli so dang much. But this is what the text says, and it comes after a moment that Gimli is just gushing to Legolas about how beautiful the caves behind Helm's Deep truly are, and how regrettable it is that Legolas never saw them. The caverns of Helm's Deep. Happy was the chance that drove me there. It makes me weep to leave them. Then I will wish you this fortune for your comfort, Gimli, said the elf, that you may come safe from war and return to see them again. But do not tell all your kindred. There seems little left for them to do from your account. Maybe the men of this land are wise to say little. One family of busy dwarves with hammer and chisel might mar more than they made. No. You do not understand, said Gimli. No dwarf could be unmoved by such loveliness. None of Durin's race would mine those caves for stone or ore. Not if diamonds and gold could be got there. Do you cut down groves of blossoming trees in the springtime for firewood? We would tend these glades of flowering stone, not quarry them. With cautious skill, tap by tap, a small chip of rock and no more, perhaps in a whole anxious day. So we could work. And as the years went by, we should open up new ways and display far chambers that are still dark, glimpsed only as a void beyond fissure in the rock. And lights, Legolas. We should make lights, such lamps as once shone in Khazad-dûm. And when we wish, we would drive away the night that has lain there since the hills were made. And when we desired rest, we would let the night return. You move me, Gimli, said Legolas. I have never heard you speak like this before. Almost you make me regret that I have not seen these caves. Come, let us make this bargain. If we both return safe out of the perils that await us, we will journey for a while together. You shall visit Fangorn with me, and then I will come up to you to see Helm's Deep. And I'm going to talk about that in another point because I would love to see the adventures of Legolas and Gimli in an entire book. But I think Gimli is the most poetic out of every single character in the book so far, except for maybe Tom Bombadil. Maybe there's like an essay in there comparing the two of them. Maybe Treebeard is in that mix too. He's very poetic. But Gimli is a person who enjoys beauty. And I think for Legolas, his prejudice is that dwarves are all about riches under the mountain rather than what he thinks the elves do, which is live in harmony with nature. But that is something that the dwarves do as well, but they just do it in their own way. And so Gimli corrects his misunderstanding here with beautiful words that would make so much sense to Gimli. Honestly, it's the greatest response you could have asked for here. Just as Legolas would never chop down trees as they are blooming in the spring, so Gimli and his people would never mind these places, for they are beautiful and perhaps even sacred to the dwarves. And they would only mind to uncover more of this beauty. And I love this line for 2 reasons. The first is what I was just talking about, how it just kind of dispels the prejudice that Legolas has. And I love as well that Legolas is quick to be blown away by the response of Gimli. Like, he has no pride but is gladly corrected here. But the second reason I love it is for what I'm picking up on as one of the greatest themes of Lord of the Rings, which is keeping the environment safe. Anyone who appears on the side of good generally seems like someone who wants to preserve Middle-earth, even if it's not said outright. The character always implies that in some way. They want to observe the beauty that is all around them rather than make it an industry of war. Dwarves desire gems beneath the mountains, but they would consider it an abomination to destroy a place as beautiful as the caves behind Helm's Deep. Elves are the same, lamenting the lack of Malloran trees in Middle-earth. Hobbits seem to live in harmony with the land and their love of things that grow. And men seem, at the very least, not to destroy the land. But orcs and Sauron are obsessed with the industry of war. And so their realms seem devoid of nature. And I just love that Tolkien keeps throwing this in there. It's like he's a novelist form of John Muir. And I think that it's drastically more effective because it's in story format, where the lessons that Tolkien is attempting to instill in this book are so deeply embedded that sometimes we may not even know that we are changed by a book or by a story. This is one of the reasons I love stories so much, because a good writer can instill values into that story in a really subliminal way. And they can help guide and direct the reader with the reader's own values and show them other beautiful things. And I just love the dispellings of prejudice in this chapter. I love it because it's just these people who have learned something for their whole life that in an instant is deemed untrue because of the humility or mercy or kind response of someone else. And this, I keep saying this, but this is perhaps the biggest lesson that I glean from this entire chapter. That the best way to dispel prejudice that someone has against you is with mercy, gentleness, humility, and goodness. I think my guards are up every single time that someone does this with hostility in their heart. But here, these characters are doing it with gentleness and respect, which seems like not only the far superior way to do it, but perhaps also the only way to truly change a person's mind. Rarely, if ever, have I ever been changed by a harsh answer or a harsh truth. But I can count the numerous times when someone has showed me grace and mercy and gentleness or humility through an answer, and my life is forever changed because of it. These are the more powerful values. And it may be easier or natural to go into anger or hate when someone shows prejudice against you, but the better values are gentleness and mercy. And Tolkien, again, shows his prowess in embedding these values in a story where it's just so painfully beautiful and obvious that I cannot help but want to adopt these things into my own life. So, be gentle to someone today. Show mercy to someone who needs it in your life, and be people filled with humility and grace. And I'll see you in the next one.